Welcome to the centre of New Zealand. Here in, quote, sunny Nelson. This mark behind me, which is at the top of a very steep hill called Botanical Hill, overseeing, there we go, the city of Nelson, is the, quote, geographical centre of New Zealand. Now, of course, that is up for debate. And it all depends on how you define it, which I'll get to in just a second. One of the things that was really important in the 19th century was how we measured and understood New Zealand. And so that's where we get the National Geological Survey, and that's when some of New Zealand's first scientists and first museum curators came to New Zealand. That happened out here in the South Island as well. Now, the first surveys were taken from Church Hill, which is just here where the cathedral is. After a quick while, the surveys were taken from the top of Botany Hill here. One of the things that this allowed was, because it was taller than the other hills, it could allow for triangulation into Nelson City using local roads and using this as the trig point. So one of the big questions, of course, is this really the centre of New Zealand? So according to Nelson City Council, it depends on your definition of the centre. For a survey, it is the centre because it's the origin of the Nelson Land District, and Nelson is the central land district among 12 other land districts, hence it's the centre of New Zealand. So you could argue that from here you're measuring out to the rest of the country. This spot gained its official status as the centre of New Zealand in 1877, when it was included in the first of many local and national triangulations. So this is the spot from where the first ever geodetic survey was measured from, and the geodetic survey is one that takes into consideration the curvature of the earth rather than assuming that it's flat for the purposes of making a map. So John Spence Brownlee, who was the chief surveyor of Nelson, was the first person to start on this, and so of course he started right here in the centre of Nelson, from the spot where Nelson has always been measured from, the top of Botanical Hill, just here behind me. And so this started here in the 1870s and worked its way around the rest of the country. John Spence Browning was surveying during the time of using chains and pegs to manually measure things. So in 1962, Dr. Ian Riley from the Department of Industrial and Scientific Research, DSIR, remeasured, taking New Zealand's seafloor into consideration, and conducted a gravity test. This considered the Aotearoa main islands and all the other nearby islands, but excluded the Chathams. This moved the centre of New Zealand out of Nelson City, just a few kilometres from town. This was remeasured twice in 2019, once by mathematician and software developer Clive Gifford, who used a finer data set and considered the land above sea level, moving the centre of New Zealand further east into the Nelson Lakes area, just north of St Arnaud. It was measured again by Jenny Black from GNS Science, the modern descendant of the New Zealand Geological Survey founded in 1865, taking into consideration the entirety of the Zealandia continent. This moved the centre of New Zealand out of Nelson and to Waipounamu, the South Island, and dropping it on a trail in the Tararua Ranges into Ika au Maui, the North Island, just outside of Greytown. So this marker here represents the centre of New Zealand, and this is the trig point from which Nelson was measured, and the plaque around it was built in 1968, along with this rather fanciful and oversized surveyor's peg. I'm back in Tamaki Makaurau a couple of weeks later because the weather in Whakatu drove us off the summit of Botanical Hill. The land surveying that we've been talking about is still really important, and now it's managed by Toitu Te Whenua Land Information New Zealand, LINZ, and you can search for geodetic markers like this one. Some are obvious, like these trig points on top of some maunga, but others are a little bit more subtle. Although you'll see these more often as you go about your daily life. While most are pins either set into concrete or under a cover somewhere, some are plates and can be quite decorative. Once you start to notice them, you'll find them everywhere. You can certainly see why these black and white pyramidal trig beacons are a favourite among trampers and hikers. They're stunning to look at, and the views from them are usually spectacularly stunning. However, the first ever trig beacon erected in Aotearoa wasn't one of these beauties, but this one, erected by Captain John Stokes of the HMS Acheron, which completed the first hydrographical survey of Aotearoa 1848 to 1851. When they arrived here in Tamaki Makaurau and they were ready to begin the survey, they set this beacon and started all of the measurements from this point. And it still stands here in Windsor Reserve in Devonport. This flag mast here on my left is also used for surveying. Originally it sat on top of Mount Victoria, erected in 1841 and moved here in 1957. Quoting from their website, the physical component of New Zealand's geodetic system is a network of physical markers that serve as reference points. Surveyors don't have to use a pin to mark a measurement point. They did here on Maungawhau, here at Ohinaro, and over there on Rangitoto. But at Maungakiki they use the obelisk, at Pukekohe they use the museum, and at Maungaika and Takarunga they use the naval installation as markers. New Zealand's geodetic system provides the reference points by which the location of all the features of New Zealand's land and sea are defined. These reference points are the basis for creating maps and marine charts determining property boundaries and are critical in construction and property development. These points are also used to measure things like sea level rise, climate change, and how our volcanic system is changing over time. As it turns out, the Centre of New Zealand monument on Botanical Hill just isn't an accurate place for it to be. There are 4 places in Aotearoa that could claim the top prize, but only 2 of them are actually on a trail, and only 1 of them is a short walk from town with a sealed path to the top and seating and pretty views waiting. So perhaps we'll give Nelsonians this one. And besides, Botanical Hill has another bonus up its sleeve. Let me just come back down the hill first. Quick little bonus, so here I am here in Botanical Park, just below Botanical Hill there, which is the geographic centre of New Zealand. And here we are at the site. This park here was the site of New Zealand's first ever rugby game in 1869. It's now a cricket field and they do some more rugby here still. It was the Nelson Football Club against Nelson College and the final score was 2-0. If you'd like to visit the Centre of New Zealand Monument in Nelson, it's a quick half-hour walk from downtown Nelson. Just follow along Bridge Street and follow the signs. Like that, Nelson was gone.